What happens to someone if they run behind a car?
They get exhausted.
Welcome to the Running Tales podcast.
Hi, my name is Michelle Lewis. 10 years ago, you'd have been lucky to see me run to the end of the road. These days, running is second nature to me. From marathons to park runs to putting my own running group through their paces. You'll often see me in suitably loud attire, getting ready to pound the pavements. And here's a secret. If I can do it, you can too. There's so many wonderful and inspiring stories in the world of running. And not just running, some of my favourite tales involve those who take to their wheelchairs, bikes or simply their own trusty feet in an attempt to get fitter, faster or just have some fun. In this podcast, I'm going to be in conversation with some of the most inspiring and fascinating of these people. Remember, it's your time, your speed, your way. The only person you need to keep up with is yourself.
Hi, I'm Craig Lewis, and on this week's Running Tales podcast, I've been speaking to Michael Hobbs-Aldridge. Michael's someone that you, Michelle, you spoke to him back in July 2020, and that was actually on the back of a superb 2019.
Yes, in 2019, he was the winner of the Milton Keynes marathon. Northampton half marathon was a good result, and he was one of the best of the British Masters circuit.
Yeah, he's a bit of a star, isn't he? But actually, I remember when you spoke to him before, that had all kind of been put up in the air.
After the Milton Keynes marathon, there was an issue around his heart, and this basically froze his running career up until now, hopefully.
Yeah, that's right. So I spoke to him this week, and I started off by asking him exactly that. Remind us what the situation was.
It goes back to sort of 2018, 2019. I was running really well, but a routine medical just picked up an abnormal resting heart rhythm that was significant enough for the nurse at the time and the doctors to be worried about it. And then following on from that, I went through numerous tests at Northampton, Kettering, Oxford, saw teams and teams of cardiologists who couldn't really work out whether running and pushing myself was going to pose a risk. The advice at the time was to take it very easy until they figured out what was going on. But they pretty much said that the best option would be to just stop running completely, which was pretty bad news at the time. I was running really, really well in 2019, ran a PB for 5K, won the Silverstone 10K, the Northampton half marathon, was running really, really well. And then obviously to be hit with that news was pretty tough. But I listened to the advice. They did say that I could get a second opinion from Professor Sharma down at St George's in London. I thought about it for a while, stopped training, lasted about a month, climbing the walls. And then at that point, I thought, now I've got to go out and start doing some training, but waited for the advice. So I pretty much went through a 2.5 year period where I was just not racing. I wasn't training properly. Just incredibly worried about what I'd been told. But the end story really came probably at the back end of last year, where I did actually eventually meet with Professor Sharma's team. They carried out a number of tests and concluded that they'd picked up absolutely nothing on a stress ECG, nothing had happened. Half an hour of really vigorous exercise, and he said there was nothing that he was concerned about whatsoever, and gave me the green light to go ahead and start training again.
That's obviously fantastic, but I really kind of wanted to just go back to that sort of moment when you first got that news, because it's perhaps for someone like me and a lot of our listeners out there who are, we rock up at Park Run and we jog around in anything from 20 to 50 minutes sort of thing, and we might do some of these events. It would have been bad enough news, but for someone like you, I mean, running is a bit of a way of life. I know you won the Milton Keynes marathon, you do some serious times. It must have been, quite aside from the fact that the health worries, it must have been really like quite a shock for what you do and what you are.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, it came at a time when I was running really, really well as well. And I think, if I remember correctly, the initial worry, or the nurse and the team of doctors that initially picked up the problem mentioned that there may be a concern with regards to sort of the long-term training effects. but I hadn't at that point been told to stop training. It was just a kind of an advisory, but they didn't sort of say stop. So I carried on through 2019 and ran some really, really good times for marathon, half marathon, 10K and 5K. And I ran a PB for 5K at the ripe old age of about 46, I think I was at the time, when I ran the about 15 minutes 22 for the 5K. And things were going really well. So oddly, the decision for me to stop running came after all of those races, or the decision from the medical team. Despite having no symptoms during racing, I'd never had any obvious concerns, other than they were picking up this very irregular heart rhythm. And they pretty much spelled it out that if I carried on pushing, their concern at the time was that you do hear stories of very fit people literally just collapsing. And it scared the life out of me.
It's the sort of Fabrice Muamba situation, isn't it?
Yeah, and obviously I can't remember the name. I don't really follow football too much, but obviously aware that the player that collapsed on the pitch as well,
Christian Eriksen.
That's right. And you hear these stories, and it starts to put things into a little bit more of a balance as to how important running is and how important the rest of your life is, and yet I still couldn't really come to terms with this idea of that I couldn't possibly run again and compete again and do what I love doing. So it was that balance of trying to be sensible. Every time I'd go out for a run and I felt even the slightest bit odd, I think it was all kind of in my head at that stage, I'd stop running for a few days, terrified that something was going to happen. So it was a really, really difficult period because I was beginning to come to terms with the fact that I might not race again, despite being in really good form, really good shape. Had eyes still on competing for England Masters, and the door got shut very quickly, and it was a big worry. But then I spoke a lot with my wife, who's incredibly supportive of my running, and for those that know me really well, they're obviously aware that I'm now a sort of a fairly newish dad, and I didn't want to put my children through that either, or the worry of not being around, and that's kind of how serious my head was thinking about the possibility of going out and running and just not coming back, and it was a very scary feeling. But then I sort of looked at it from a different perspective, that if I was given the news, I was literally waiting for this advice from Professor Sharma, I believe he's one of the world leading experts in exercise cardiology, looks after a lot of professional footballers and athletes. And when he said that, listen, on a basis of probability and risk, from what they investigated, that I sit at a very low level of risk, no more than anybody else who goes for a park run or a race and at whatever level. So, based on that, I kind of felt that, well, if there's no risk, then there's nothing to stop me going back what I enjoy and I love doing, and that's kind of how it's then sort of progressed forward into sort of 2022, where I'm now back to sort of training and with an eye on competing again.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that in a second, but I did have one other thought on as you were going through all of that, and I wonder whether there might have been a stage where you were thinking, I can run again, but I can't run again at the pace I did. I mean, what I'm getting at here, Michael, was there going to be a stage where I had a chance of beating Michael Hobbs-Aldridge in a 5K because you were having to do 9-minute miles like the rest of us mortals?
If you'd asked me that question 5 years ago, I probably would have said there's absolutely no way that I'm interested in entering races without either running very quickly or winning, because that's just been kind of the way things have been for the last sort of 10 years, I guess. But as I'm gradually becoming more and more kind of tuned into the fact that I'm not going to race forever, then my kind of enjoyment of running has changed slightly, and I think I enjoy just running. But I think it would be difficult for me personally to run and not feel that I'm running at the best I possibly can. I know that age is going to have a factor, but I still want to be the fastest 50-year-old in 2 years' time and the fastest 55-year-old in another 7. So I think that's just the competitive nature that I've got, and I just want to be as quick as I can for the age that I am, and compete against other athletes at the same level. So I don't think I would enjoy it as much if I was running a lot slower, put it that way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's why people like you run the speeds you do. 2022, what's the next aim now? What level are you at now? Because I guess this has almost taken a couple of years out of where you were.
Yeah, it's been tough coming back. Not from a motivational point of view. I think that's always it's never been a problem to get out the door and train and follow a training program. But obviously, when you've lost sort of the best part of 2 years at the competitive level, then the fitness at the sharp end, if you like, is definitely gone, or had gone. And it's tough coming back from that, because I'm sort of watching other people that I know that I'm as good as, if not better, running some really quick times, and I want to be there. But I've also got to be very sensible with the return, because, as you know, overload is going to cause injuries, and I just had to accept the fact that it would take time doing the basics well. So a lot of aerobic running, a lot of easy pace running, and not stepping it up too quickly too soon. And I think I've managed that really, really well. So since being told that I could come back and train again, I did have a bit of a problem with my hip area and the hamstrings, and it was very, very painful coming back in. I think everything had just tightened up that much more, and my body had become a little bit out of sync a little bit. So I did have a very painful injury in my left hip that I've managed to get sorted out. But now that's cleared up, I think going back, what we are now, sort of April, May. So if you go back to about January, I started to fit in, good solid 40 mile a week of running that I built up sort of over November, January time. And then I entered a kind of a 7 mile race at Burley, which is March, which was my kind of first target event, just to sort of put a line in the sand as to where I was. And that went pretty well. I'm not quite as sharp as I was, but I had a good second place in the race, and averaged, I think, about 5:30 a mile for 7 miles, which is where I kind of wanted to be. It was pretty pleasing to be able to run at that speed again. And then it's just moving on to fitting in more training, to another good training block. And I've gradually built it up, and I've done quite a few 60 mile a weeks with a lot of kind of speed interval work and tempo work, which was pretty much back to where I was. I'm just now allowing my body to catch up with the training and respond to the training, which is happening a little bit slower than it used to do. But I definitely feel a whole lot better than I did back in March for that first race. And I've got another half marathon in 2 weeks, or just under 2 weeks. So I'm going to be doing the Buckingham Half Marathon, which was another kind of event, not necessarily kind of targeting it as a quick race, but just another opportunity to get racing again, and to see where I am. And then hopefully later on in the year, a marathon, which I have entered having a marathon, so that's in October, and that'll be probably the next main target to try and really hit a quick time.
And is that the distance that you're going to be looking at now? Because I know you're pretty adept across a number of distances, from 5K right the way up to the marathon. But is the marathon distance the one that you would really be looking at?
It's the one race distance that I've felt that I've not performed as well as I have at the other distances. I think if you base it on a kind of performance in terms of what my best races have ever been, probably the 10K and the 5K have probably run quicker compared to other people's times. And I've just been really frustratingly close to the golden sort of 2 hour 30 mark. I know that if I don't give it a go this year, or possibly even next year, that I'll run out of time age-wise to achieve that. So that's the big target, I think, for this year, is to try and get close to 2:30, if not under.
Well, I don't know if you picked up on the result of the Milton Keynes marathon on Bank Holiday Monday, which I think I'm correct in saying that you've previously won that race. But a chap called Michael Young came home in 2:29 to win that, which I think was a course record. So perhaps even, yeah. I know that's another minute faster than you were looking at, but maybe a little aim there as well.
Yeah, I did see it actually. I know the name. I've never raced against him. Phenomenal athlete. I think he's just turned 35, so he's just entered the Masters ranks. and it's very likely he'll get an England best out of that. So yeah, incredible time. So I think it's probably about in the region of about 2.5, 3 minutes quicker than I ran to win it in 2019. But those are the things I need to aim for. And I think
was that your record at MK?
No, I think I remember a chap called Ben Fish. I think he's got about a 2:25, 2:26 time to his name. I think he ran about 2:31. So I think Michael ran probably a minute and a half, 2 minutes quicker.
Yeah, they said it was 2:31. I think so.
Yeah, sounds about right. And I always think the Milton Keynes is quite a tough course. It's one of those courses that's not, I wouldn't say it's hilly, but it's just a lot of little dips and troughs, and it just breaks the rhythm up enough to deaden the legs. And I found the last 2 or 3 miles pretty uncomfortable because your legs just gone based on lots of little dips and troughs on the course. But it's not a hilly course, but I wouldn't say it's a fast course either. So I think Abingdon's slightly quicker, so that would be to my advantage.
No, that would be great. No, I have had the pleasure of doing Milton Keynes, and it's just every time you go under one of those underpasses, it's up and straight back down again, isn't it?
They're not big hills by any stretch of the imagination, but if you ever do a training run where there's just a little short climb and then back down again, and it just takes out the legs if you're doing a long session. So yeah, no, I was pleased with my time when I did do it. But yeah, exceptional running from Michael to do sub 2:30 on that course. But he's run a 69-minute half marathon, I believe, so he's in that sort of shape. So
yeah, definitely. So what does training look like to have that ultimate aim at the moment?
Well, one thing I've always thought, that compared to other people running those sorts of times, I don't actually do a lot of mileage. I know mileage is not the be all and end all for marathon training. It depends on sort of which sort of programs you follow, but I definitely think there's room for me to be stronger over the marathon distance. You know, I look at other people's marathon trainings, and they're quite happily running 80, 90, 100 miles a week. And I've always had a problem doing that from an injury point of view or an injury basis. But whether or not I can look at different ways of being stronger by being maybe more gym work, just to get the legs physically capable of running those sorts of distances in training. So mileage is one thing that I'd be looking at, is just to be sensible, but increase the mileage a bit more than I've been used to. I've run most of my marathons off 55 miles a week, 60 miles a week, which is still quite a lot, but it's not in the same ballpark of other people running 2:30 marathons. So that's certainly something to look at. But I'm a big fan of the Jack Daniels training formulas. So I'll be sort of taking a lot of the bits out of the training plans that suit my own training from that. So the typical sorts of sessions are a lot of sort of 16 to 18 mile sessions, but a lot of tempo work within the 16 to 18 miles. A lot of his programs don't always follow up to the sort of the 22, 23 mile easy runs. They tend to be slightly shorter, but sort of harder efforts and harder work within that time frame. So I'll see if that works. And it's a similar program to when I was training in 2019, and I know it works. So yeah, that's the plan. And I think most people are aware of kind of the sort of 80%, 20%, 20% hard work in the week. And the rest of it is just easy running, recovery running, long runs, easy runs, but all quite sort of the zone 2 stuff, but with a couple of hard sessions in the week.
For anybody who's going out running and looking at their next race, not necessarily anywhere near the levels you're at, that kind of variety of training is kind of the most important thing for people.
Absolutely. I think when I first got involved in training like I do, it was through a chance meeting with my then coach Ian Wilson, and he just opened my eyes to how you should train and how methodical the training needs to be in order to just chip away and just get quicker and quicker and quicker. So I'm always open to learning new ideas, but Ian taught me a huge amount about the structure of training. I know that when I ran my fastest ever 10K, it was literally off a basis of doing 2 track sessions a week. Those track sessions would rotate between eight lots of 800 meters at about 3K pace, 4 lots of wild mile at 5K pace, and 3 lots of 2 mile at 10K pace. And that was pretty much it. And I just rotated them round. So whichever 2 I did one week, I'd start with the third one at the beginning of the next week, separate the hard sessions by 3 days if I could, because that allows for recovery. Everything else was just easy running. So long run at the weekend, easy runs in the week, and the formula works. So the idea being is that you're doing a lot of running at sort of the lactic threshold pace, which obviously improves the lactic threshold. But the shorter session, so the 800s were designed just to be running quicker than you would be at race pace. So obviously if I'm running my 800 at 3K pace, I'm running quicker than I would be at a 5K, 10K race. And it just gets you very biomechanically efficient at running and getting used to running hard for long periods. And when it starts to click, it's just a really, really good feeling when you can run a long way at pace without feeling uncomfortable. And that's kind of the aim really for most races.
I think you mentioned earlier that one of your aims now is that you'd like to be the sort of fastest person at 50. What does that practically mean?
Hoping the other guys that are 48 and 49 slow down a bit. I think Masters athletics over the last sort of few years has really there's a lot more people seemingly being able to run those speeds. I don't know if it's just more people are involved in Masters athletics, but I think when we start to look at the times, if I can still run, I'm thinking sort of for 5K, I'm thinking I'd need to be running around about 15:30, 15:40 to be right at the top level, age group anyway. Yeah. And I think the quickest 10K so far this year in the UK is just under 32, and I know him quite well as well. So I think he's run about 31:50 for 10K. So those are the sorts of times. But I've only got a year and about 3 months to go before I go up another age group. So I think the plan is to just remain healthy and fit for this year, go into next year running well. And if I can hang on to that fitness for another year, then I think the age would be to certainly be under 16 for 5K, knocking on the door of 32 for 10K, and sort of that 71 for half marathon. Those are the sort of time zones for the 50 age group, I think.
It does actually seem to be the case that there's more and more people just running for longer and running faster for longer. I mean, we see it even locally. You obviously get somebody like, we're not talking speed now, but someone like Michael Williams doing the joggle at his age, at over 70. And we running seems to be something which is becoming even more of a thing that you can do whatever age you're at.
Yeah, I think so. And I think people are understanding more about how to keep themselves going, whether it's diet or just following better exercise programs, or just, I think parkrun's had a huge amount to do with it as well. I think people are being more aware of how important it is to keep fit and healthy. And as a result, if there's more people doing it, there's more people going to realise they're actually pretty good at it as well, or at least very good for their age group. And as a result, I think that is a huge motivator to sort of keep going. We are seeing a greater depth of talent, and some of the times you're seeing, I think, sort of the world record for the over 60 marathon. I can't remember his name, but just phenomenal times. We're looking at 2:30 at the age of 60. So there's people still out there doing these sorts of times, and that's kind of where my focus has to be, I think. So.
Yeah, well, that gives you another 10 years to aim at that one then.
I don't. I think, is it Tommy Hughes? Is it Tommy Hughes? I think he's an Irish guy. I mean, he's just incredible what he's achieved. But that's partly just being genetically enhanced. I think you've got to have the right to be able to do that sort of thing. And if you haven't got the right genes, then your ceiling of performance is always going to be different to somebody else's who's got a better start. So, but then training has a huge effect as well. And if you're motivated to train, then it maximizes your natural abilities. So.
And you touched on it a minute ago. One last question: when are we going to see you back at the park run at Northampton, leading us all home?
Well, the age group record actually is pretty quick, and I don't hold it. So I might be gunning for that. I think it's just outside 16 for park run for the 45 to 50 age group category. So I'll have one eye on it. What I would say is that when you do run a 5K, it sort of takes it out a little bit of you if you're going to run really, really quick. So it sort of has to fit into the race diary at the right time. But maybe I'll treat myself on my birthday or something to a park run.
Fantastic. Oh, well, I look forward to seeing you at that one, Michael. And thank you for joining us again on Running Tales.
It's been absolutely my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.